Hello everyone, and welcome to another Sodor Pro review. So, if you haven't been living under a rock, Netflix has been in the news recently, for better or for worse reasons, depending on how you look at it. So because of this, I decided to take a look at their catalog of original content, specifically a series that I began watching back in junior year of high school, but I never actually got around to finishing it. A somewhat obscure series called Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts. I'm not a fan of calling something overrated or underrated when describing something, but underrated is probably the best way to describe this series, as you don't see that many people talk about it, which is a shame, as, while not perfect, it's honestly a pretty decent show, with nice music, good animation, a good story, etc. Why do I think that? Well, let's find out. This is my review of Netflix and DreamWorks' Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts. So, Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts was initially created by a man named Radford Seacrest and was developed for TV by a man named Bill Wolkoff. All the way back on February 2nd, 2015, Radford would publish the first page of a short-lived webcomic series, simply titled Kipo. The comic was about a teenage girl named, Kipo, trying to survive in this post-apocalyptic world that's overrun by mutants. The comic will consist of 32 issues, with its last issue being published on May 15th, 2015. As around this time, Radford would secure a deal with DreamWorks, turning his little webcomic into a full-blown animated series. With the help of Bill Wolkoff to assist as co-showrunner, development began. A pilot that has still yet to see the public eye would be created, as Radford stated in an interview with the L&J Q&A podcast. After 4 years of development, the series would finally premiere on Netflix on January 14th, 2020. The show would run for 3 seasons, with its final episode being released on October 20th, 2020. Of course, some things would differ from the comic and the finalized show, as Radford has stated in interviews. Originally, he wanted something more darker and grittier, but as he would put it, quote, "My natural sensibilities sort of just came through," end quote. Like how originally Jamak was supposed to have his tongue cut off in the original webcomic had it continued past issue 32, as opposed to his tie being cut off in the finalized show. Or how Benson was originally a full-grown adult in the comic, but was aged down to around a 15 to 16-year-old in the finalized show. As to quote Radford, "If there was an adult there, they would always just turn to the adult to solve all their problems. So we aged Benson down to be a fellow kid," end quote. Which I can sort of understand from a writing standpoint. But I think the most interesting difference between the webcomic and the actual show that I found out while researching this vid was that Kipo was originally just a normal human, and not some human-mute hybrid like in the finalized show. It is interesting looking at the comic, given how short-lived it was. But given how the show, and subsequently the comic, were originally supposed to be much more darker and grittier, one can only imagine how that would have played out if the said darker and grittier premises were realized in both pieces of media. Though, if you watch the show, to me at least, there are instances where it's apparent that the team hadn't completely forgot about the original dark and grittier concepts. Again, one can only imagine how different some of these scenes would have played out if the show wasn't targeted for a PG, family-friendly audience. So, the story of Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts is interesting, as you have Kipo, a 13-year-old girl who has spent her whole early life underground with the majority of humanity, as the surface is overrun by mutants. But due to circumstances, partially thanks to her parents, she ends up separated from her father and on the surface. The first 2 seasons consists of her trying to get home, and more specifically, find her father. And through the trials and tribulations of her journey, she begins to understand that the humans' preconceived notions about the surface and the mutes is wrong, as despite the environment and how they function, the mutes are not that different to us humans, as they have their own full-blown societies, cultures, etc. All culminating to what we see in Season 3, where Kipo tries to bridge the gap between the mutes and the humans, with her being a hybrid, and bring some kind of peace, and try to put a stop to all the division on the surface. Honestly, it's interesting to see the show evolve as it goes on, and watching how nearly every little detail that's introduced comes together by the end. Seeing the characters grow and evolve, Wolf in particular, who I'll talk about later, is fascinating, as you see them go from being afraid of this crazy mutated world to basically embracing it, and getting a better understanding of what it means to be a human, which I'll go into more detail later. So, Season 1, the season that kickstarts everything. Right off the back, the show wastes no time in jumping straight into the story. We begin right after Leo, Kipo's father, in an attempt to keep Kipo safe, threw her into the river to protect her from the Megamute that was destroying their burrow. I like how we mainly see things from Kipo's perspective, which makes sense as she's the main character, as unlike someone like Wolf who's seen the hardships and just generally experienced some messed up things during her time on the surface, compared to Kipo, who at this point in the series hasn't really experienced any of that. She's basically looking at everything with fresh eyes, fascinated with it all, and as we later find out, before getting trapped on the surface, she spent her time in the burrow, reading and learning about the surface world, and had a bit of a desire to one day see it all for herself, which we learn later on her parents, mainly her father, always intended for her to go to the surface one day. Just not in the way that fate ultimately decided for her. I like how we see Kipo making allies with the mutes during her travels, like we see her making friends with Yumyen, Cotton, the raccoons, etc., effectively proving to Wolf and the mutes on the surface that it is possible for different mutes, and just mutes in general, to work with humans, without using threats or manipulation to get them to do what she wants, like we see with Scarlamagne and later on Dr. Amelia, which I'll talk more about later once we get to them. While we're on the characters, I have to talk about Wolf. I'll get into more detail about her later, but her arc and growth as a character this season is interesting, as she starts off as this broken survival type of a character with a every man for himself or herself type of attitude, and we learn later on that this partially stems from past trauma from when she was younger, when her adoptive family, who were mutes mind you, tried to hunt her down. Not surprising why she would have trust issues with anyone, mutes in particular. But by the end of the season, she's in a very different place than she was at the start, both literally and metaphorically speaking, as she's a bit more trusting, and as we go into Season 2, she's slowly getting over her prejudice towards the mutes. Benson and Dave are alright. I do like how much of a contrast Benson is to Wolf, as while both have spent their early lives on the surface, they've turned out quite different. Again, you have Wolf, who's this serious, hardened, survivalist type of a character. Benson, on the other hand, is more chill and just wants to have fun, along with Dave. I also like how Benson and Dave's dynamic ends up tying into the overarching plot of Season 3, which I'll go into more detail later. Moving on to the animation, it's really good. The artist did a very good job, though it is a bit choppy and the movements do look a bit stiff, but it's generally pleasant to look at, especially these night scenes. I mean, just look at the lighting, it's really good. But I think where the animation really shines is the fight scenes. I mean, just look at them. And finally, there is the music. It's good for what it is. It fits the general action, fast-paced aesthetic the show's going for. As for the lyrical songs this season, they're alright. Yumyen Hammerpaw was nice and catchy, and an interesting way to explain to the audience who Yumyen is before we actually meet him. What We Have Is You was a nice, sweet, slow song that really shows Kipo's close relationship with her dad, making you, the audience, really want to see her make it back to him. Though, if I'm going to be honest, I think my favorites were the licensed songs that the team used, like Fight the War or Don't Stop Now. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to the latter. But generally speaking, Season 1 is pretty good, though if there's one thing I do take issue with, and the show as a whole, is that I feel like the pacing is a bit quick in some places. I'll go into more detail about it later, but I'll just say, there are instances in the season, and the show as a whole, where I feel like a longer runtime for the episodes, or another episode or two squeezed into the season, could have helped flesh things out. But aside from that, Season 1 generally does a good job of introducing us to this world, and setting up all the major characters, plot points, and little details that will become relevant later on in the show. It's not perfect, but it succeeds in setting everything up, and getting one hooked by the end, and excited for what's to come later on down the road. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Now on to Season 2. This is where things get interesting. I like how, just like with Season 1, it wastes no time into getting right into it. It picks up immediately right where Season 1 left off, where Scarlet has kidnapped Leo, and Kipo is on a two-headed mute flamingo thing, telling her friends that she intends to go after them. I like how we get more focus on Scarlet this season. We didn't get to see much of him until the tail end of Season 1, but here, he is now fully in the spotlight. We learn so much about his backstory, and why he is the way he is. And if I'm going to be honest, it's honestly quite sad. I'll talk more about it when I get to the character section, but I'll just say, it's interesting to see his backstory. And I also see some parallels to Kipo's story in Season 1. You have these characters who've spent the better part of their lives living in an underground burrow, and then a sudden, unforeseen incident causes that burrow to be destroyed, and the characters are suddenly forced to go and live on the surface. The difference being, while Kipo managed to find friends in Wolf, Benson, Dave, and Mondu within the first few days she was on the surface, as opposed to Scarlet, who had friends, but it's clear that they were a bit of a negative influence on him, especially when it came down to his opinions on humans. I also like how it further delves into the mystery of Kipo's Megamute powers, as well as her arc about learning who she is, and learning to control said powers in order to preserve her humanity, so she isn't permanently stuck as a Megamute, which I'll talk more about later. I also like how many twist reveals there were this season. I can't tell you my surprise when it was revealed in the Season 2 episode, Fungus Part 2, that the Megamute monkey that attacked Kipo's burrow and that Kipo managed to tame back in Season 1 was Kipo's mother, Song. Honestly, when rewatching the show for this review and looking at all her appearances while she's in this form, it's honestly quite sad. Like, Song spent the last 13 years of her life trapped as this giant Megamute, unable to communicate, and we also learn later on that she spends most of that time basically living as a slave to who you initially think is Scarlet because of the mind-controlling pheromones that emanate from the collar that was around her neck, but come Season 3, that turns out not to be the case. I also found it interesting how it's revealed that the reason why Scarlet or Hugo exists was due to an effort by Leo, Song, Emilia, and the other scientists in their old burrow to understand what caused all this mute stuff to happen. And we also learn that Song and Leo did manage to figure out how to reverse it, only to then back out after seeing firsthand how the mutes are flourishing, and we also see that the two decided to go down another route, while keeping in line with the burrow's mission to bring humans back to the surface. By instead of turning the mutes back into normal animals, they decide to try to make humans more suitable for living in this mutated world. Enter Project Kipo, their human-mute hybrid daughter. A decision that, depending on how you look at it, would have sweeping ramifications for everyone. The new characters introduced this season are more hit or miss. The otters were alright, and their song, Down with the Humans, was alright, though as a fellow human myself, I'm not a big fan of a song whose chorus is chanting about my species' downfall. Troy, Asher, and Dahlia were fine, I just wish we saw more of them. Well, mainly Asher and Dahlia. I'll talk more about it later, but they don't really do much this season, or really in this show in general. At least Troy had his little romantic subplot with Benson, which they don't do much with until the final few episodes of Season 3, but At least it's something compared to Ash and Dahlia, who hardly do anything of note this season, or again in the show in general. As for Amelia, while we don't get too much focus on her until the final few episodes this season, it's interesting how they initially used her, as when we first see her, she and her gang are these mysterious, masked humans snooping around the surface. And to be honest, until the Fungus two-parter, I actually thought it was Song with a few other humans from her old burrow. I also really like the misdirection with her, as both she and the main cast are all against Scarlemagne and want to stop him and his authoritative takeover of the surface and enslavement of the humans. It's only later on, after we're properly introduced to her, that while she and the main cast have similar goals, she's very clearly doing it for the wrong reasons, and is someone who's really not to be trusted. Moving on to the animation this season, again, it's really good, especially during the fight scenes. They're really well choreographed. As for the songs this season, they're fine. Again, Down with the Humans was alright. Heroes on Fire was really good. I liked how it was used to strengthen Wolf and Kipo's sisterhood, and how it was used in the season's final as Wolf finally gains the courage to sing the song with everyone, as a way to remind Kipo of who she is when her anchor is destroyed, so she can turn back into a human, and not lose her humanity, and not remain stuck as a Mega Jaguar. As for the licensed songs, I think the ones they chose were good. Feelin' was a bop, Give It To Me was nice, and worked with the scene of Kipo finally managing to keep calm and her heart rate down in order to rescue Wolf. The song that played at the start of Benson and the Beast was good, really fit the tone of the scene of Kipo going full beast mode out of anger and fear in an attempt to rescue her mom from Scarlemagne. So overall, Season 2 is good. It does a good job of building upon what Season 1 had set up, while also introducing new concepts and plot points that will become relevant later on in the show. You can really see the characters' growth this season, and by the end of the season, they're very clearly more than just friends. They're a family that has each other's back, no matter what, which will be very essential for what they're going to go up against next season. I'd say I give it a 7 out of 10. Now, we're on to Season 3, the season that wraps up everything. Right out of the gate, I like how it starts with the main cast looking for Amelia, after Kipo became fully aware of her true intentions regarding humans and their relationship with the surface. I like Kipo's overall arc this season, which is trying to bring peace amongst the mutes and the humans. It feels like such a natural progression of the story, now that Kipo has found her father and understands who she is, and has gone on this huge adventure befriending the mutes and understanding that despite what the humans in her old burrow and Wolf told her, the surface really isn't that dangerous, and the mutes aren't that bad, or really that different from us humans, and that it is possible for different mutes to work together. And if humanity really wants to get out of the cycle of being underground and fearing the surface, the best thing to do is make peace with it and embrace it. I also like how her character development is highlighted this season. Like, she's still the naive, easily excitable 13-year-old girl, but after all the stuff she's been put through over the course of 2 seasons, it's clear that she has matured a bit. She cares deeply about her family and will do anything to protect them, as well as recognizing anyone who is against them isn't her family. But at the same time, she understands that fighting isn't the answer, as attacking the humans would only perpetuate the division between the mutes and the humans, and potentially create another Amelia, or Scarlemagne, and it's better to try and make peace, as we see her inviting the humans who are actually more open-minded to her prom party, as opposed to sinking their ship like she almost ended up doing. I also really love Wolf this season. The girl has really come out of her shell. You can really see how much she's changed since Season 1, which is evident in her supporting her adoptive sister's idea of peace on the surface. Like, there is no way Season 1 Wolf would have even heard Kipo out on her idea of attempting to make peace between the mutes and the humans. But here, she's actually open to the idea, and it's only after her and Scarlemagne's run-in with Greta where she finally understands and is fully on board with it. And a good way of symbolizing this is her getting rid of her wolf cloak, where she finally lets go of what happened to her with the wolves, is able to get past her prejudice, and embraces Kipo's idea to try and get along with the mutes. Benson and Dave were good this season. I liked how we got to learn about the two's backstory, about how they met, which started out as a seemingly never-ending struggle between Dave's fellow, Dave mutes and the humans in an attempt to get a toy fan. And I liked how the backstory, and subsequently Benson and Dave's relationship in general, was basically used to show and remind Kipo that her goal for mutes and humans to live in harmony on the surface isn't impossible. Scarlet was also interesting this season. I thought his whole redemption arc was interesting, as at first, he isn't sorry for what he did, which is expected, and unsurprisingly, everyone, other than Kipo and somewhat Wolf Benson Dave Amandu, don't trust him. However, the few times we see him over the course of the season, he begins to really understand what he did wrong. Through Kipo making him work and hang out with the other mutes, he starts to understand what Kipo is getting at, of people helping you, not out of fear, but because they actually like you. All this builds up to him making the ultimate sacrifice, with Scarlet helping Kipo take down Amelia, redeeming himself as he did it because he wanted to keep his friends and family, and most importantly, his adoptive sister, Kipo, safe, and not as a means to gain power and control. Finally, there is Amelia. I'll talk more about her later, but I'll just say, we learned so much about her this season. We get more of an understanding of why she is the way she is, as it seems all this resentment and anger towards the mutes and Kipo seems to stem from pressure of wanting to make her father proud, which is a bit sad. Doesn't excuse what she's done, but still, she's so stuck in her own ways that nothing, not even her own brother, the one person who she was close to, could change her mind. And all she wanted was to be right and to make humans the dominant species on the surface once again. I also like how Amelia is basically the main thing that ties nearly all the major events and characters in the show together. Song attacking Kipo's burrow at the start of the show, that was Amelia, because she wanted her to kill Kipo, or Scarlet having a grudge against the humans. You can thank Amelia for that, for forcing him to run on that treadmill in order to study his pheromones, as part of her research to turn the mutes back into normal animals. It's also partially why Leo kept Kipo in the burrow with the other humans, less out of fear of the surface, and more to protect her from Amelia. Honestly, this season does a great job of managing to tie every major detail together, which leads us to the ending. Honestly, while I do have some minor gripes with it, which I'll get into later, it's still generally satisfying, seeing all the humans and mutes finally at peace with one another, seeing Kipo and Benson all grown up, as well as seeing both Benson and Troy as a couple, Wolf leading her own pack of mega mute dogs, etc. Though, if there is one critique I do have with the season, is that I feel like it does drag a little bit towards the end, mainly with the episode Hidden Treasures. It just felt like it was there so the team could meet the 10 episode quota, as it just randomly introduces these two Skrull characters who've had no previous establishment, and also never appear after this episode, just to hide the float that our main cast has been working on before they can start going around apologizing to the mutes for what happened in the episode It's a Trap. As for the animation, once again, it's really good, especially during the fight scenes. This is honestly the best they've looked in the show. Like, look at the series finale, Age of the Wonderbeasts. It looks so good. As for the songs this season, I thought they were alright. The song in the first episode, Everything is Crabs, was good. The song the Narwhals sang in the episode Code Word Milkshake had a good beat to it. It's interesting how the Narwhals are basically this world's equivalent to a K-pop group. The songs the humans sang to the mutes for what happened with Amelia in an attempt to regain their trust to attend Kipo's prom in the episode Hidden Treasures was alright, though my favorite one, which also serves as the show's opening theme song, is Age of the Wonderbeasts, the full lyrical version that partially plays at the end of the series finale episode of the same name. It fits so well, as it gives this sense of finale, and now that this crazy venture's over, we can finally relax, and good days are ahead. I can't count how many times I've listened to this song since my initial watch of the series. And as far as licensed songs this season go, I think the ones they chose were good. Sugar was a bop, and the song that plays when Wolf and Scarlet are battling Greta was good. So overall, I thought Season 3 was really good. I liked how it managed to wrap up everything. While it did admittedly feel a bit drawn out towards the end, it was still a very satisfying conclusion. I'd say I give it a 7 out of 10. The characters in the show are generally really well written. First, we'll start off with the star herself, Kipo. I like Kipo's character. Her whole naive, innocent persona is such a contrast to characters like Wolf, Benson, and Dave. Now yes, Benson and Dave are more chill than Wolf, but even so, they still have an understanding of the dangers of the surface, as opposed to Kipo, who, at the start of the series, really has no idea what she's doing. However, as the show goes on, she starts to get a better understanding of how things work in this post-apocalyptic world. And she also begins to subtly see the problems and divisions between the different mutes and mutes in general versus humans on the surface, which leads to what we see in Season 3 with her wanting to stop Dr. Amelia and unite the mutes and humans in an attempt to bring some level of peace on the surface. I also like her little journey of finding out who she really is, as we see in Season 2 with her finding her anchor, as she gains more of an understanding about her Mega Jaguar powers. And who she is, well, Kipo, the fun, lovable, naive kid, daughter of Song and Leo, best friends to Wolf, Benson, Bondu, and Dave. Despite having these weird mute powers, she's still her. She is still Kipo. This in turn helps her preserve her humanity, so as to not be permanently stuck as a Mega Jaguar when she transforms, like what almost happened with Song, and later on Emilia when they transformed into their Mega Mute forms. Honestly, Kipo's overall arc in the show is interesting to see play out, how she basically helps bridge the gap between mutes and humans, which is even more interesting given the fact that she's a hybrid. And seeing her have a positive impact on nearly everyone she comes across during her journey is interesting, whether it's helping the Timbercats find their leader, Yum-Yun, helping Scarlet maintain the error of his ways, etc. One more thing I have to comment on before we move on is that Kipo took the news about how her parents basically treated her as a guinea pig by injecting her DNA with Mega Jaguar DNA before she was born really well. I mean, given all the crazy stuff she's been through in this world, I guess it makes sense, as if I were to find out, I would be both excited to have these cool powers, but also feel a bit awkward, given my own parents basically experimented on me and never gave me the choice as to whether or not I ever wanted these powers or not. And it's clear that's what Benson and Wolf are thinking in this scene. Speaking of which, Wolf has to be my favorite out of the main cast. I really like her tough, edgy persona. You can tell she's been through a lot in her time on her own on the surface, since she was chased off by her old wolf pack. Honestly, Wolf's backstory is quite tragic, as once upon a time, she was a bit like Kipo, innocent and more willing to trust the mutes. I mean, she considered herself a part of the pack, and might have even considered Margot as a sister, only for that trust to be completely shattered when the pack's leader made the reveal that they only had her around and trained her just to make hunting her more of a challenge for the younger wolves in the pack like Margot. It's honestly quite sad to see, and it does explain why Wolf has trust issues with everyone, mutes in particular, which is why I like her overall arc in the show. Her hanging around with Kipo really helped her overcome that trauma, and as the show goes on, she slowly but surely is more willing to trust others and open up to them. Like how, albeit it was off screen, she opens up to Kipo, Benson, and Dave about her past, and she starts to see the benefits of not fighting with the mutes, but working with them, all culminating to what we see in Season 3, where Wolf finally gets rid of her wolf cloak, again, symbolizing her letting go of what happened to her and getting past her prejudice towards the mutes, and finally fully embracing Kipo's mission about bringing peace to the surface between the mutes and the humans. And we see that in the series finale, with her protecting Mondu from the Ambers raining down on the party, her battling Greta in an attempt to help Kipo defeat Emilia, and in the time skip, with her leading her own pack of Mega Mute dogs. Aside from that, I really do like her general dynamic with Kipo. The two are very much polar opposites, with Kipo and her more extroverted persona, in contrast with Wolf's more introverted persona. It really works, and by midway Season 1, the two have a really close bond, and while it was messed up, I can understand why Wolf didn't initially tell Kipo about the note she found that would have helped them find Leo and the other burrows sooner, as she was worried she would lose her once they got there, as Kipo is the first human, or really sentient being in general, who's not tried to kill her, and has actually been nice to her, since being chased off by her old wolf pack. And she feared the potential of losing that, given their initial deal was Wolf helping Kipo find her father and the other humans in the other burrow, and once that happened, the two were supposed to part ways. and as we see, the deal ultimately did not stand, given once they arrive at the burrow, she ultimately decides to give burrow life a shot, and decides to help Kipo go after Scarlemagne, rescue Leo and the other humans, and later on help Kipo defeat Emilia and bring peace amongst the surface. Moving on to Benson, he's an alright character. I like the contrast between him and Wolf. Again, while both have spent the better part of their early lives on the surface without human parents or guardians, they've turned out quite different. While Wolf became more hardened, always having her guard up, and hardly trusting anyone around her, Benson is much more chill. He does understand the dangers of the surface, but similar to Kipo, he is more willing to give people a chance. And I think that's thanks to his relationship with Dave, as the two, once rivals and at each other's throats, managed to get past that and form a bond, becoming inseparable. I also thought his relationship with Troy was sweet and wholesome. I just wish we saw more of it. I also liked his relationship with Kipo. He's kind of like an older brother to her, as while he wants to help Kipo and keep her safe, he's more willing to show her the fun side of this post-apocalyptic world, while Wolf just wants to strictly keep Kipo safe and complete her mission. Next we have Leo. He's an okay character. I still think it's ethically questionable to experiment on your unborn daughter, but that's just me. But in all honesty, it's clear he and Song really care deeply about Kipo, and support Kipo's mission in trying to bring the mutes and the humans together to try to stop Emilia, and ultimately bring peace on the surface. I also like his general dynamic with Kipo. The two are so similar, as they, along with Song, are very interested in science and biology. They both want to keep mutes safe, and find another way to bring humans back to the surface, without getting rid of the mutes. I mean, both Leo and Song were the ones who found a way to reverse the mutations, but decided not to tell anyone, as they did not want to upend everything the mutes had set up for themselves over the last 200 years. And Kipo once and was successful in preventing that from happening, by mending the relations between everyone so the two sides could finally make peace. As for Song, similar opinions to Leo, though I will say her backstory is quite tragic. She spent a good 13 years trapped as a megamute, unable to change back, because she never had a proper anchor. While she never really lost herself, she was still unable to change back, as she spent most of that time under Emilia's control, going to different burrows to try to find and destroy Kipo, only making it harder and ultimately impossible for her to change back to a human. While it's quite tragic, I will say it's admirable that despite being stuck as Mega Monkey, she never lost hope in trying to find Leo and Kipo. And even though Kipo didn't realize it at the time, whenever she could, when she wasn't being mind controlled by the pheromones, she tried not to hurt Kipo, but protect her, and try to stop Scarlemagne, which makes it so satisfying when she finally gets turned back into a human, thanks to Leo stealing the cure from Emilia, where she's now properly able to communicate and reunite with her daughter and her husband after all this time. Next we have Dave. I don't have much to say about him, but I like his chill, fun guy persona. As I stated previous, I liked his dynamic with Benson. He does care deeply for Benson, as when you think about it, he did somewhat raise him, given how old he is and how old Benson was when they met. I also liked how, similar to Wolf, he managed to get past his prejudice towards humans and ultimately befriended one, that being Benson. Also, his whole gag of him being invincible by aging and de-aging was interesting, though I can't help but wonder how exactly can he die, given how easily it was for the other Daves to get taken out. Moving on to Yumyan, I thought he was an interesting character. I liked how despite he and the rest of the Timbercats being more human-like, they still have feline characteristics, like pouncing on bugs, being in boxes, etc. I also thought his dynamic with Kipo was sweet, as he was the first mute, other than Mondu, that Kipo managed to form a bond with, after helping him find the courage to get back to his people after running off in fear when Song, while she was still stuck as a Megamute, attacked the Timbercat forest. He returned the favor in trying to help Kipo, first by helping her find the Megamute, that being Song when she took the Timbercat village's scratching posts, and then later on helping Kipo set up Hamufa to unite the mutes and later on humans to stop Emilia. I also liked his character arc, as at first, like the other mutes, Yumyan was very hostile towards the other mutes on the surface, like Cotton and the other snake mutes. But thanks to Kipo, we slowly start to see him change. And by season 3, he's straight up partying with Cotton and the other mutes, which is what makes it so sad when he gets hit by Emilia's cure, and turned into a normal cat. Like, he was one of the first mutes who really did believe in Kipo. I mean, he willingly, with little question, allowed Asher, Dahlia, and Troy to stay in their village after learning Kipo sent them there. And he let Kipo use the main hall of the Timbercat village as a makeshift headquarters in Season 3 when they were trying to figure out what to do about Amelia. As for Jamak, I don't have that much to say about him, but I did like his mini arc of initially wanting to do everything he could to work directly for Scarlemagne. It's only after he met Kipo and got to know her is when he began to change, and it seems he subtly took Kipo's advice in doing some soul searching, albeit off screen, ultimately resulting in abandoning his ambitions to work for Scarlemagne and instead indirectly helping Kipo. Whether it's letting her go when he could have taken both her, Mondu, Benson, Wolf, and Dave to Scarlemagne, or directly helping Kipo, be it helping them defeat Scarlemagne's minions when they're attacking Cappuccino's restaurant, or helping spread the message about the alliance Kipo was forming to unite the mutes to stop Amelia. While he'll never outright admit it, Kipo did have a positive impact on him, and it's a good thing she did, as he could have very well ended up like his fellow frogs. Next we have Troy, Asher, Dahlia, and Doug. I place all 4 of them together, and I'll talk more about this later, but while I don't dislike them, there isn't that much to say about them, as they hardly do anything of note in the show. Troy at least had his romantic subplot with Benson, which was nice, but the other 3, they hardly do anything noteworthy. You could honestly remove Asher, Dahlia, and Doug from the plot, and the show wouldn't be all that different. Heck, Asher and Dahlia don't even appear in the time skip, only Troy does with Benson. Moving on to Scarlemagne, I honestly have a bit to say about him, as his backstory is interesting, as he was once like Kipo, all young and innocent, but once Amelia found out about him and put Leo and Song to work on using him to find a cure for the mutes, things started to change. He tried to keep a good attitude, remembering the promise Leo and Song made to him about how once Kipo was born, they would leave the burrow, only for fate to take things in a different direction. Honestly, Scarlemagne and Kipo's first days on the surface are kind of similar. Both are people who, due to unforeseen circumstances, were forced to go onto the surface. The only difference is, again, while Kipo was able to find good friends who were willing to help her on her first days on the surface, and was lucky to run into Mondu, who was mute who actually accepted her, Scarlemagne had a very different experience, to say the least. While unjust, you can understand why he was the way he was in seasons 1 and 2. You can really see the hurt and betrayal this guy feels regarding Leo. Like, he promised to take him with them, but he didn't, and when the burrow collapsed, he didn't go back for him to see if he was alright. Again, while unjust, you can sort of understand his reasoning for wanting to enslave the human race. Though I will say, I like his eventual realization that not all humans are bad as he initially thought, and that it's Amelia herself who's the real problem, which adds further weight to his bold sacrifice in helping Kipo take down Amelia when she's in her Megamute form. Aside from that, I also like his very upper-class, prestigious persona, which was influenced from the books that he read after getting intelligence thanks to Song and Leo. I also like how, similar to the Timbercats, he still retains some of his ape characteristics in spite of his mute intelligence, and I like how it's incorporated into his character. Like his crazy, evil laugh is similar to that of when real apes get excited. Finally, we have Dr. Amelia, and boy do I have some things to say about her. As to the previous, the girl's whole plan was to turn all mutes back into normal, non-sentient animals in order to make humans the dominant species on the surface once again. Knowing how similar the mutes have become to humans and the communities and societies they've created in the last 200 years, that's a little messed up. I mean, I can see where she's coming from to an extent. She, along with Song, Leo, and the other scientists in the old burrow, wanted humans to live on the surface once again. The key difference is that Song and Leo wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't uproot everything the mutes set up for themselves in the absence of humans, which is something that Amelia could care less about, which seems to stem from pressure from her father, as he also wanted to bring humans back to the surface. Like, this girl does not care. Again, she straight up killed her brother Liam, the one person she was close to, out of fear that he would have stopped her plans right then and there by telling everyone in their burrow what the surface is really like and how wrong they've been. This also ties into what happened to her when she was in her Megamute form, as while Kipo managed to not lose herself in the Mega, as she managed to remember who she is, which helped her retain her humanity, which allowed her to transform back into a human, and while Song wasn't able to transform back into a human on her own, as she never got the chance to gain an anchor, she also managed to not lose herself in the Mega Mute by not forgetting about her husband and Kipo, which helped preserve her humanity. As opposed to Emilia, who was so laser focused on trying to make humans the dominant species on the surface again, and would stop at nothing to achieve it. Again, she killed her own brother and also enslaved Song when she was stuck in her Mega Mute form. She had lost any sense of humanity she had once had back in her youth, so it's no wonder why she came so close to losing herself in the Mega, and why Kipo had to use the cure to rescue her. She never had a chance of gaining an anchor. She only cared about herself, and clearly nothing at that point would have helped her remember what it really means to be a human. It's really interesting, as Emilia wanted to help humanity so badly, but in the process, she ultimately lost her own humanity, both metaphorically and literally. I also like how similar both she and Scarlemagne are, as both wanted power and control over the surface, and neither really cared about the people that they were supposed to be leading. But while Scarlemagne was able to see how wrong he was, and was able to change, and at least make up for what he did, Emilia, despite it being shown to her several times that she's wrong, she would just double down, and it ultimately caused her downfall. So overall, the characters in this show are really well written. There isn't really a character I would say is poorly written, with the exception of the 4 characters I mentioned earlier. But most of the characters have some level of depth to them, like Wolf, Emilia, etc., which makes you want to learn more about them and see more of their story, which is one of the positives I can say about this show. Speaking of which, now, it's time to talk about the good things about this show, as there's quite a lot actually. First off is the animation. It's really good. Admittedly, the movements are a bit stiff, mainly in the first season, but it still looks good. I like the anime style look to it, which was intentional, as Rad has said in interviews. He was inspired by various animes he's watched over the years, and it shows, especially during the fight scenes, as it's one of the places where the animation really shines. But it's not just the fight scenes. Look at some of these shots. The lighting, the colors, the composition, everything just looks so good. But it's not just that. The music is really good. I really like the hip-hop feel that most of these themes have, which works for the fast-paced action in the show. But it's not just the instrumental songs. Again, the lyrical songs in the show are really good. If it wasn't obvious from the previous sections, most of them are licensed songs, meaning the creators got the rights to use a pre-existing song for the show. And again, I thought the songs that they chose for the show were pretty good. Again, I can't stop listening to the song Don't Stop Now. Admittedly, I would have liked it if the score used more original songs as opposed to licensed ones, but generally I thought the songs that they picked were good and worked with the scenes that they were used for. As for the original songs the team came up with for the show, they're fine. They're admittedly more hit or miss, but not bad by any means. But most of them were just alright. Though I will say, my favorite original song for the show is, again, Age of the Wonderbeasts. As stated before, I like this show's overall continuity. I liked how Emilia is basically the central driving force for a lot of the major things that happen in the show, like Song being stuck as a Mega Mute, and subsequently being the reason why Leo made Kipo go to the surface, or the reason why Scarlemagne has such a grudge against the humans. But it's not just that, you also have the aforementioned little details like Benson coming out, Wolf and her arc, etc. All this builds up to what we see in Season 3, where it's mostly all wrapped up in a nice satisfying way. I also like the overall anti-war message of the show, with Kipo constantly trying to find other ways to settle a conflict in a way that doesn't involve fighting one another. The first instance of this being the snakes and the Timbercats, when she and the Timbercats were passing through that desert area the snakes live. And then there's Scarlemagne, with his quest of becoming Emperor of the Surface, and Kipo trying to stop him to get him to see how wrong this all is, and show him that this is not the way to get people to, well, like you. And finally, there's Emilia, with Emilia trying to get rid of all the mutes with her cure, and Kipo trying to stop her and preventing the mutes from being turned back into normal animals. I also like the little message or commentary about humanity. As stated before, Kipo was able to not lose herself in her Mega Mute form because she had an anchor, her friends and family, which reminded her of who she is. Because despite the size, fur, etc., she is still Kipo. It's that and how much Kipo loves her friends and family is how she was able to not lose herself in the Mega Jaguar and was able to remember who she is and not lose her humanity. And again, A similar thing can be said about Song. The only reason why she couldn't change back was thanks to Amelia constantly putting her under mind control, never allowing her to concentrate and properly gain an anchor. But despite that, again, she never forgot about Kipo and Leo, her family, which in turn helped her remember who she really is, which helped her not lose herself in the Mega Monkey and retain some semblance of her humanity. Then you have Amelia, who was so obsessed with trying to make humans the dominant species on the surface again, it made her blind to how the mutes actually functioned, as despite their mutated appearances, the way they function and act is not that different from us humans. And it's because of this, and her refusing to listen to anyone who said otherwise, she basically lost her humanity, metaphorically speaking, leaving with someone who cared about no one but herself, and ultimately wanted to be right no matter what, which is partially why she almost lost herself in her Megamute form, as by that point, she had forgone her close friends and family in her pursuit of being the one in the right, meaning she had no chance of ever getting an anchor, nearly fully losing her humanity, if it wasn't for Kipo saving her. It's why I find Amelia and Scarlemagne two opposite sides of the same coin. I think that's how you phrase it. As Scarlemagne claimed to care about the mutes, when in reality, he really didn't care for them at all. He just wanted attention, power, and control, and silenced anyone who stepped out of line. Like, the dude was willing to let all the mutes be melted into gold, instead of helping them. Both Amelia and Scarlemagne wanted power and control over the surface, and both tried to achieve it by any means necessary, and in the end, it led to their downfall, more so with Amelia than Scarlemagne. It's honestly a bit ironic that the one who claimed to care so much about helping humanity ultimately ended up losing her own humanity, compared to the one who never made such a bold claim and ultimately ended up helping humanity while also managing to retain her own humanity. One last thing I liked, and this is more of a minor thing, but I really like the title card transitions. I like how they use something in the background to spell out the name Kipo before transitioning to the show's title card screen. So overall, while not perfect, there's a lot to like about this show, from the characters, animation, etc. You can really tell the team put a lot of love and care into it. However, like I said, it's not perfect, and it does have its flaws. Speaking of which... Now, as much as I've praised this show, there are some issues I take with it. For starters, the pacing is a bit quick for my liking. It's not that bad, but there are a few scenes where I feel like we could have spent a bit more time on. Like, for example, when Kipo finds Yum-Yum in the trees and helps him confess to the reasons as to why he's up there, I feel like it could have been a bit longer. Like, maybe Kipo confronts Yum-Yum, Yum-Yum hisses at her, but then slowly, after some coaxing from Kipo, he reluctantly admits to the reason as to why he's up in the trees. This is just one example, but there are multiple instances where I think a slower pace could have worked in the show's favor. A good example of this is Jamok's redemption arc, as while I liked it, the issue is that the vast majority of it takes place off screen. Because each season only has 10 episodes, we lose the ability to further expand on this stuff, and just have to mention it in straight lines of dialogue and move on, as there's so little time in the seasons and individual episodes themselves to work with. And while I've praised this show for its continuity and managing to tie nearly every little detail together, the keyword being nearly, as the quick pacing causes some concepts to end up being half-baked, or in some cases, concepts are introduced and are completely forgotten or incomplete by the end of the show. For example, Troy, Asher, Dahlia, and Doug, again, didn't really do that much in the show. Well, mainly the latter three. Again, at least Troy had his mini romantic subplot with Benson, but even then, they don't really do much with it, outside of the season 3 episode, Hidden Treasures, but at least it's something. Asher, Doug, and Dahlia barely did anything of note. Like when season 2 first kicked off and introduced Dahlia, Troy, and Asher, I was genuinely curious as to what they would do with them. You now have a set of humans just like Kipo, who've spent the majority of their formative years living underground, only to be forced to live on the surface. There's so much story potential right there, and they proceed to do nothing. Like when Troy, Benson, and Mondu bring Asher, Troy, and Dahlia to the Timbercat village, the show just kind of forgets about them until the final few episodes of the season. I had actually forgotten that these characters existed until the final few episodes of season 2. Personally, I think what they should have done is have a back and forth between what the main cast is doing and what this trio of humans is doing at the Timbercat village. Just something to keep them more involved in the plot. To further expand on this, when they're being taken to the village, Wolf and Benson help them learn the ways of the Timbercats, just in case they don't accept them at first, mainly by chopping up a log. And out of the three, Dahlia is the one who's the most successful in doing so, and seems to have a lot of pent-up anger and frustration. In the show, the reason that's given is because of the crazy days she's had so far, which fair enough, but even so, maybe you could say it's rooted in anger towards Scarlemagne and the Mutes. And now she's somewhat conflicted, as she and the other two have spent most of their lives fearing the surface. But here she is, and it's very different to what she's been led to believe. And over the course of her time in the village, she starts to see, with the help of Troy and Asher, who are a little more open-minded than her, she begins to change for the better, and channel that anger towards Scarlemagne specifically, and later on Emilia. Just a little arc, as that scene alone gave me the impression that Dahlia was going to play a major role in the fight at the end of the season, only to do absolutely nothing. There is also the fact that these three knew Kipo since before the events of the show, and it's only ever brought up in the Season 1 final beyond the Valley of the Dogs. Personally, what this should have done is in the Season 3 episode, Requiem for a Dave, is after Emilia's invasion of the Timbercat village and some of the mutes have been turned back into normal animals, Kipo decides to go after them. In the actual show, both Benson, Dave, and Mondu go after her, which leads into Dave telling Kipo about his backstory and how he met Benson. It's not bad, but in my ideal version, Asher and Dahlia go with them. When they get to the old burrow, they're the ones to help remind Kipo about who's on the boat that she wants to destroy out of rage. Not Wolf and Benson, as I was kind of scratching my head as to how did Wolf and Benson know exactly who the people from Kipo's old burrow were. Moving on to Troy, I have no issue with his relationship with Benson, but I wish more was done with it, outside of the few scenes we got with them and the episode Hidden Treasures. Say like maybe there's an episode with him and Dave, like Dave feels jealous that his best friend Benson is suddenly spending more time with his boyfriend than him, yada yada yada. Yeah, it's a plot we've seen before, but at least it's something. As for Doug, they set her up as the one person on Emilia's ship who's on Kipo's side, only to completely forget about her until the final few episodes of the show. What I think they could have done was once she gets back on the ship, they maybe have 1 or 2 scenes with her, planting seeds of doubt in Emilia's plans in the other humans. Like she pokes holes at what Emilia plans to do, and if they're really doing the right thing. None of the humans change their minds right then and there, but the seeds are planted. And in the case of Ash and Dahlia's parents, when they help invade the Timbercat village, they see the Timbercats protecting their daughters from the Death Ivy and their weapons. And once they surrender said weapons, and hear their daughters out, they begin to have doubts. And start to think once they and the other humans retreat. Then later on we see them talking to the other humans about Emilia's mission, further questioning if this really is the only way forward. All this comes to a head when Kipo invites the humans to prom, and thanks to Doug's influencing words making the way around the humans on Emilia's ship, we now have a more concrete reason as to why the humans, after what just happened in the previous episode, It's a Trap, decide to give Kipo's peace party a chance, as opposed to just going along with it because why not in the actual show. Another issue I had was the vaccine that Song and Leo were developing. The main plot point of Season 3 is that Emilia is developing a cure for the mutes to turn them back into normal animals, to allow humans to conquer the surface. In response to this, Leo, and later on Song, are in a race against time to develop a vaccine that can reverse the side effects of the cure. I mean, Song was really stressing out about this once she was turned back into a human, and towards the end of the season, we see Song and Leo sneaking around the city to get more supplies for the vaccine to fix the demutated mutes, only for the show to completely forget about this, as come the time skip, we see everyone living their best lives. Kipo and Benson are all grown up, and the mutes that were demutated are still normal animals. I'm sorry, what? Why was this such a major plot point in the season if it ultimately led to nothing? I mean, if Emilia could make the substance that caused this via Song and Leo's notes, why couldn't Song and Leo take the original notes, along with Emilia's notes after she's defeated, and use it to make the vaccine? I would have less of a problem with this if the show itself gave a reason, like say they couldn't crack the code, as we see Song was struggling to understand it all due to her being stuck as a Megamute for so long, or the notes Emilia took were somehow lost, like say during the fight between Emilia and Kipo, or Emilia's ship was destroyed and along with it were the notes. But nope, unless I missed something, the show gives zero explanation for this. We're just supposed to accept that they're just normal animals forever and move on. Another issue I had was that it's never really explained how the surface became this post-apocalyptic world. All we know is that it's been 200 years since the humans were initially forced underground. And that's it. I would have liked it if we got maybe not an outright answer, but just some hints as to how the world went from this to this. And finally, one last nitpick I have is Kipo's design. My main issue with it is more with the fact that when watching season 1 for the first time, if you were to ask the audience who would have weird powers, the most obvious pick is going to be the kid with purple skin. Like, yeah, I get it was a reference to the comic, as the humans in the comic had different skin colors like green, purple, etc. But still, I would have had her just not purple to make it less obvious, so as to make the reveal of her powers a bit more of a surprise for the audience. So overall, while I do like the show, there are some issues I have with it. Again, it mainly comes down to the quick pacing, which is partially due to the fact that each season is constrained to just 10 episodes. I don't hate what we were given in the finalized show, but I just feel like an additional episode, or of the already existing episodes, either had one more rewrite or longer runtime. It could have really helped to make things a bit more solid and feel more complete by the time the final end credits roll. So overall, what do I think of Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts? While not perfect, it's definitely a good watch. I was absolutely hooked by the end of season 1, and while I wish some things could have had a bit more focused, I still generally enjoy the show. The show's overall messages were good and a bit thought-provoking. The music was decent, and the characters were well written, for the most part. I do wish we could have gotten more content from it. However, given the recent news with Netflix, which has more than likely already taken effect by the time you're watching this video, I highly doubt that's going to happen. But who knows? I mean, I doubt that many people expected any more canonical material from the Owl House after what happened with Season 3, but yet, here we are with a new graphic novel on the way, as of the making of this video. So hey, anything's possible. With all that being said, I give Kipo and the Age of the Wonderbeasts a 7 out of 10. This has been Sodor Pro, and until the next video, thanks for watching.